As an improving adult player, you may have noticed how daunting of a task it can be to defend against d4, to defend against the queen's gambit. This is just one of the most frustrating things in chess, actually, even for strong chess players. But fortunately for you, if you're a London system player, there's an easy choice of an opening against d4. Now, this opening scores great at club level. It is structurally similar to the London system, and on top of that, it's easy to understand and doesn't require a lot of memorization. So let's take a look at what this opening is and why you should play it if you play the London system. So if you're a London system player, you can probably take one look at this board, and this structure here will give you like a nice comfortable feeling. We got our triangle set up, and we got the bishop outside of the triangle. So now let's look at a setup for black that would be the corollary of this, but from the black side. Now that would look something like this. Got our triangle set up with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. So interestingly, there is an opening that we can use that lets us get this type of position most frequently, and that involves this move, playing a Slav with this move a6. And so what I want to do is I want to look at how that comes about in a chess game, and kind of explain why I think this is a really good option for us club players, and this is why I am exclusively playing this opening until I gain at least 200 more rating points, and I'll probably, to be honest, stick with it for life. So let's just pop in, pull up a regular chessboard, and take a look at how this position comes about. Now, we can most frequently get this London-like structure as black in a safe way by playing a Slav. So we meet d4 with d5, c4 with c6, playing the Slav move order. The idea is that we don't block our bishop behind this e6 pawn like we would in a queen's gambit declined. And now this is kind of like where if we were playing a mainline Slav, we would take on d takes c, we would take that c pawn. Now in the Chameleon Slav, we play a6. And this is the defining move of the Chameleon Slav. And interestingly, this move gives us the largest probability of being able to develop this bishop out to f5 in a safe way, so that we can then follow that up at some point with e6, have our triangle set up, and have this bishop outside of the pawn chain. And so now it may seem, at first glance, it may seem a little bit weird on why a6 is so important, but it is very important. And so one thing to do at first is I just want to show you, I'm going to add another image onto the board here, onto the screen, to show you how well this Chameleon Slav scores. Give me 1 second and we'll get that set up here. Alright, so now we can see the Lichess database at the club player level, and it will show how well different moves do against in this position here. And one thing to note is, like, the most common move here is e6. That would be the semi-Slav, but as we can see, it scores 7% better for white than for black. And that's not to be unexpected. It's a difficult opening to play, but also, you know, the Queen's Gambit is such a hard opening to play against, especially for club players. Now, if you also notice the move bishop to f5, if we just tried to go and get our kind of our reverse London position right away, that also scores 7% worse for black than for white. And we'll kind of we're gonna look at that, and I'm gonna explain why a6 makes that move more effective in the sense that it's less dangerous. Now, one thing to note, this Chameleon Slav, which is a6 in this position, you'll notice it's way down here. And that's one big advantage of it, is a lot of players aren't going to understand this move, this a6 move. And I'll show you later how that can lead to some traps for us that good players even will fall into. I was playing a player today that was rated 2200 classical on Lichess that fell into this trap. But the move a6 actually scores just as well for white. It has an even score for white and black. So it scores just as well for black as it does for white. And now the purpose of this move is to support playing bishop to f5 without running into trouble. Now, you might say, well, why? What kind of trouble are we going to run into here? Well, if we play bishop to f5 straight away, there's a couple different things that can happen, but it all revolves around giving up protection of this b6, of this b7 pawn, and white will try to exploit that by playing queen to b3 at some point and then exchanging on d5, doing c takes d, and they'll hit both of those at the same time. So let's just play this out and see how that would work. So in this position, white could play c takes d. If we don't want to lose a pawn, we have to recapture. And now white plays queen to b3, and they hit both of these weaknesses that we have, both b7 and d5. And so here, like, ironically, our best move would be to play our queen back here, just to try to, otherwise there's no way we can hold on to both of those pawns without dropping a pawn. And so that's kind of like what makes it difficult to just play that bishop to f5 straight away. Now, if instead of bishop to f5 straight away, when we get into this position here, instead of playing like that would be the mainline Slav, if we play our Chameleon, notice that these threats are no longer as strong. And that's because we have a couple additional options of defending this b7 pawn. So we can defend that from attack. So let's say, for instance, let's say white plays e3. Well, now we can actually safely play bishop to f5, because this move here now, queen to b3 by white, is not as scary for us. We can actually meet that in two different ways. He won't be able to do this trick where he takes our d-pawn with this c-pawn and then is double attacking our b-pawn and our d-pawn, because we have two responses. We can either play rook to a7 and use that little hole we created by playing a6 to protect that pawn. And so now that queen is over here, and it's not doing a lot over there because it's no longer, no longer an actual threat to take that b-pawn because our rook covers it. The other thing that we can do, actually, is we could simply play b5, because now we have adequate support with the c-pawn and the a-pawn. And so because of that reason, this a6, this Chameleon Slav, makes it more likely that we can actually play our bishop out to f5 and set up our triangle, and then that's a more familiar position to us. Now, in addition to just being so solid, and that's one of the reasons it scores so well, and that we kind of feel comfortable in these type of positions if we play the London system, it actually has a little bit of venom to it if white doesn't understand what's going on after a6. So after a6, one thing that you might run into is that white players will often play bishop to g5. And they do this because this is a common move in the Slav, in the mainline Slav, where instead of playing a6 like in this Chameleon, we play d takes c. That's kind of like the old mainline Slav. And a lot of times what happens is black at some point will end up playing this bishop to g5. And because they face that more often, they kind of like sometimes just like tend to just play it, thinking it's fine. Now the problem with doing that in this situation, when we play the chameleon, this move here allows us to just take that c pawn, because we are now threatening to just play b5 and just hold on to that pawn. We just take the money and run. And interestingly, you will notice that in this position here, after we play a6 and enter this chameleon, the most common move at club level by a significant margin is this bishop to g5. And we just do d takes c. And we have a great position now. We're a pawn up. They have a little bit of compensation for it, but we've equalized as black. And most players at club level, number one, they won't have anticipated this, so there's the psychological impact of them just all of a sudden realize, oh my god, I'm a pawn down. I thought this guy was a potzer after he played a6. I thought he was just kind of passive. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in a position where they're a pawn down. And this is probably objectively fairly equal if two top grandmasters were playing or if two computers were playing each other. And, you know, the side with white can really make good use of extra development and space and time. But that's not the case with the people that we're playing. So this just, obviously you can see, but it scores much better for black in this position than it does for white. Now, playing this Chameleon Slav also has the advantage of being universal in the sense that if you play like knight to f3, well, you can just play d5 and then c6 and set up the Slav structure. You can do the same thing, you know, if they are an English player, you can just start with c6 and play that before you play d5. And then you can just try to set up, you know, get your bishop outside of the pawn chain, set up your triangle, play your bishop out to either e7 or d6. It's just very, very thematic play, and you feel comfortable with this because it's the same kind of setup as the London system. So that's another beautiful advantage of this playing this Slav, is that we get to play it against anything they throw at us other than e4. And then it also has the advantage of being very strong against the mainline Slav. You can see it scores better than all the other types of Slavs, including the semi-Slav, the mainline Slav. And part of that is it's just so solid. And part of that is because this a6 has some venom to it that white, if they haven't run into this before, and there's a very good chance they may not have, or if they have, they haven't studied it, you know, after the fact and brushed up on it, you may win a pawn right out of the opening. And that actually happened to me today. And so that kind of made me think, well, maybe I'll make a video on this, put it out there, because I had a good friend point this out to me, but otherwise I wouldn't have necessarily been aware of this Chameleon Slav. And just a couple things to mention. The final thing is that this opening is very easy to learn. You don't have to memorize a whole lot. You have to understand some ideas. And so the thing to know is that we're aiming for that reverse London setup, basically, and we use a6 to do that. And there are ways for white to play in which they make that not be the most effective plan. But then there's just several different alternative setups, about 5 setups. And if you know these 4 alternative setups, basically, then you can usually figure out the plan and don't have to have everything memorized to make good moves. You kind of know based on what white does. If they try to stop you from playing bishop to f5, they have to give things up to do that. And by understanding that, then you'll know what your plans are and you can just play it. And so there's actually like a very, very good Chessimple course on this, and I'm not like endorsed to promote Chessimple courses or anything like that, but there's a lifetime repertoire called the Chameleon Slav. That's another name for the Chameleon Slav. That was the grandmaster who popularized it. Grandmaster Kolovich did a phenomenal job in that course. And so that's another beautiful thing about playing the London and the Chessimple Slav is you got two really good courses that do an excellent job explaining the ideas, and the excellent resource to use to learn these. And Alex Banzia's London system is one that's geared towards club players, and that's excellent for the London. And a perfect pairing for that would be this Chessimple Slav. And so I'll put a link. I have I already probably put it at the top here, but you can click on. I'll put it at the end. I have a playlist where I try to explain the ideas behind this Chameleon Slav, including this A6 idea where I go into more depth than I did here. But I talk about the different alternative setups that black can do if white tries to prevent us from just getting into our reverse London system where we have our triangle set up with the bishop out on f5. And so you may want to check that out, because I do really think like this is the way to go. This is the best way to go for a London player if you're an adult improver. You get something that scores really well. You don't have to memorize all kinds of crap, to get these good scoring positions. And it's just a comfortable way to play. So, I hope you consider it. I hope that you found this helpful. Consider watching those other videos I made on the Chameleon Slav. I'm going to probably be making more in the future, more stuff covering the main lines. I've kind of so far focused on alternative setups if we can't get that reverse London setup. So anyway, hope you found that useful. Have a good one.